Yes, sir, right there.
Quick question for the coach. I want to know who you came in second to at the New England cross country.
Everybody catch that question? He wants to know from the coach who came in first and who came in second there.
I honestly don't remember his name. And that story to Ryan, he was down, and I needed to tell him something to pick him up. I run for a lot more reasons than that.
Master bullshitter, nice.
Can we get another question? Yes.
You talked to, what about the girls and running and the culture of running for girls? There were some girls in there, and you talked about girls' races, but...
Yeah, you'll see a lot of the girls, they trained, you saw that beautiful scene where Sean is stretching his baby. And his wife is pictured in there, but she was the girls' coach. And she was on maternity leave, and Sean was coaching both teams, and that's why you saw the girls and the boys. And actually the girls' coach this year, in 2009 is when this covered, he is now, Arvis Myron is the coach, was the coach of the girls then, and he's now the head coach of both the boys and the girls team. That season was my last season coaching at Tuba City, sadly for me. But he's doing a great job. And he ran in the 70s under a guy named Bud Davis, who's a Hall of Fame coach in Arizona. And he coached, you might have picked up, Tuba City's now won 20 state titles in cross country. Under Bud Davis, they won 14 consecutive titles from 1970 through the early 80s. He suddenly died of a heart attack in the early 80s, and that broke the string. But Arvis ran under Bud Davis. The voiceover in the beginning, much of that was Thomas Atafley, who was coaching with me. He ran with Bud Davis, and he once said that so it's now Arvis and Thomas are coaching the boys' teams. Hatafli means medicine man. It's he now works at the hospital, actually. The only reason he's not head coach is because he's got a job that takes him away, but he works in the mental health department as a healer in the Tuba City Hospital. So there are many roots that are giving back to the community in Tuba City, and I picture Dennis someday giving back to the community in the hospital. I saw him last weekend. We watched a movie on healthcare called Catching Fire. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's getting some buzz now, but that seemed to inspire Dennis to go back to the reservation and provide healthcare there where it's really needed.
Audience, one of the things, I've now watched the film 4 times, and one of the things I'm absolutely amazed at is the scenes. I mean, because capturing running, there's a spirit to running, there's an energy to running, and it just comes out. I mean, the different angles from the different views. Sean, editor, Brian, first Sean, tell us about the whole editing process, because it really delivered.
Oh, thank you. First of all, I gotta just make a confession. I hate to run.
That was going to be one of my questions.
I was winded just going up the stairs.
And that's why I wanted him to edit the film. I didn't want this to be just a film for the running community.
Well, one thing I want to say about Brian, I want to embarrass him just a little bit. I'm sure there's some filmmakers out there, you guys know how much work you have to put into this to make a film. And Brian spent 2 years of his life, that was just the shooting. I mean, there was time before that, getting the planning and everything you have to do, the pre-production, and then of course he was right with me in post-production and has been with it ever since. So several years of his life that he's put into this. And when he was out there all by himself. It was just him and his camera. And again, he was walking into families, the teams that they didn't know who he was, and they weren't immediately forthcoming with their emotions. They're not particularly articulate about talking about their feelings. And the way Brian got those incredible intimate moments was by, sticking with them for all that period of time. I mean, it's a tremendous investment that he put in to put what was up on the screen. And yes, I don't run, so it was, I think, a good choice for me or somebody like me to step in, because I was new to it, and for me, it was also a process of discovery of, how does this work? I thought that cross-country running, as many of you, if you aren't runners, probably think too, or did, that it's a solitary sport. I didn't realize that it was a team sport. And the parts that make it a team, I couldn't quite understand exactly how it was, that's why we had those moments in there that try to explain to you that, for instance, the three man is really running against the three man. They actually have positions in the team, and that was really amazing to me to learn that. And it lent the motivation for each person on the team. They're not trying to just win the race outright. They have goals on the team that help everybody move forward, and I was just really captivated by that.
So Brian, I know you've got a running background, I've read the bio and everything. So this question is going to lead over to Chris next. So you captured these angles, so you come from this running background. So I know in all our hearts, we envision that silhouette running across the sky. We envision running across a river, up a stream, and all of that. So how did your background in running influence those camera angles?
Okay, first I'll just diverge just for a second. Just to follow up on what Sean was saying, this was a very long time in production, and I just want to say thank you to my wife, Paula, because as patient as I was making the film, she was even more patient, and all the time that I spent away. I actually met her shortly after I started the film.
And
the time that I made the film, we got married. Now we have
and had twins.
We have twins now. So. But anyway, you talk about the angles. Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about. I think there's a very simple reason why there's not a lot of running documentaries, and that is it's difficult to film running. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, how am I going to shoot this? How am I going to convey this? I've seen some really bad, I've seen some bad solutions to that problem, and I knew that it was going to come down to, how I shot it. I did crazy things. I bought the lightest Steadicam rig that they make, and I learned how to run with it, and I could run like 2 miles with it, and then I'd have to lay down for about 24 hours. But there's a few shots in the film. They had to be there because, I wasn't going to let
If I
that
tried
go.
to cut any of those, he's like, no, that goes back.
But basically, so what I decided was that I needed a light camera, and I needed a camera that I could run with, and I basically built. In filming as well, you need radio mics, and those radio mics have transmitters. So I actually bought a vest, and I kind of built a little hole, like the holders into the vest. So I had the whole rig kind of strapped to my body, and the technology was sort of just at the right moment where I had a high definition camera that, was still small enough and light enough that I could realistically run around with it. And that's what I did, and over time I learned all of the workout routes that they could take, and I learned, okay, I need to be able to get to 3 or 4 positions maybe within a workout. For a race it's easier because you have a course map, and I could sit down with the map the night before and I could say, okay, usually I could only get to 5 positions in a race, or so, to stay ahead of the kids, because that's not easy. I mean, these guys are fast. I don't think I would have been able to run varsity on the Tuba City team, when I was at my high school ability, but I might have been 5-man. But so anyway, workout after workout, I began to learn their different routes, and so I knew, okay, they're going out on this route. Okay, so I know that here are my 3 positions for that route, and just over time, I got to know, okay, from this position, I can get a really nice, silhouette with the Grand Canyon in the background, and, but I have to, haul ass to get up there. And, I also had sometimes I had a rental car the whole time I was out there. So sometimes it was also, driving ahead of them occasionally and jumping out, getting the shots, jumping back in the car and running. So, and the only other thing that I realized was that if you film somebody, when you film somebody from a static shot in a race, all you see are a bunch of people running across the screen, and I realized that finding points in the race where there was a turn was key, because if I could track the camera with them, as soon as you track the camera at the same speed, everybody else sort of falls out of focus, and so you get the idea of exactly who, okay, we're following, this person. It kind of singles them out just by the camera movement. And then it also allows you to edit as well. The other problem is if you have a stationary shot, and one guy passes, well then what do you do? What do you cut to wait for the next guy to pass, right? So, there's some films where I've seen them actually just speed up the footage to get to which looks absolutely ridiculous and doesn't convey, the actual tempo and pace, that you're running at. So those were a couple of, strategies I used to kind of solve the visual
Masterfully
problem.
done,
So
masterfully done. I mean, you captured that spirit of running.
Thinner and fitter.
Oh my
Brian,
God.
before Twins.
yeah, I ran the Chicago Marathon in 08 when I was filming during the season. So I mean,
But-
now forget it.
I will say, we had no idea you were filming some of the best shots there.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
he like the mountain of misery, pain. He had run up the backside and was at the top. We didn't see him. And he was zoomed in. It's a much tougher hill than.
Well, that was and over time as well. Just different strategies for stabilizing the camera were key, and that came from my background. The first guy that I worked with was a Polish cameraman who was known as the human Steadicam. And I was really training as an editor, but I was always taking in, always observing him. So some of his little techniques.
So visually you captured it. So Christopher, I wanted to ask you, it's just like, you do that in words. So and you like running, you love running. So how do you transfer that love for running and put those words out there to do basically, again, what each of you have done? Visually you've presented it, and in words you do it.
I should correct you on one thing. I'm a lifelong running hater. I'm not kidding. I mean, I got into this whole thing thinking, why does anybody do this shit? You get hurt. It's boring. Doctors tell you not to do it. That was my starting point on this. Seriously.
I remember you tried out basketball team and you went to rowing, and I read that and I was just like going, okay, well, usually you train to prepare for those things.
Yeah,
so.
running was the punishment you had to do in order to do the other stuff you really wanted to do. You really want to play hoops, yeah, I run a little bit. So that was my starting point. But you finish college, and suddenly the sports end, and the eating commences, and you start getting bigger, and you get to a certain point. You've been out of school for 10 years, and you want to do something to try and get back in shape. And that was my starting point. I was trying to run a little bit, constantly getting hurt. I'd go to see doctors and said, well, dude, look at the size of you. Of course you're getting hurt. You're like Shrek, It's like a refrigerator, on shoes. And so I assumed, that my starting point was that running's bad for the body, the impact is bad for the body, but then you hear about the double motto. So that was my starting point, not as a guy who liked running. And the best piece of advice I got as I started to work on the book was make sure you tell the story from the beginning, not from the end. Tell it not from the point of view of like, oh, I see, now I've been to Dr. Lieberman's lab and I've seen that humans have evolved as long distance runners and that running shoes are a big con and all the stuff. I knew all the stuff at the end of it. I didn't know it at the beginning, so I tried to tell the story from the beginning, from the guy who did not like running, thought it was stupid, and then gradually you start to come to this awareness.